Joining us now, Eurasia Group Managing Director Faraz Maqsad. Faraz, thanks for being here. How's the region viewing this ceasefire announcement and the U.S. involvement?
On a gasp of relief for most in the region to see that, in fact, this did remain contained. We saw yesterday the much anticipated Iranian retaliation against the United States for the United States hit on the nuclear facilities in Fordow. That was carefully choreographed, telegraphed ahead of time from the Iranians to make sure that the U.S. then does not respond in a much more aggressive way that can threaten the stability of the regime. It's rarely the case that ballistic missiles fly and they demonstrate weakness rather than strength. Here, the Iranian government, the Iranian regime, clearly very weak, looking for de-escalation. And I think that's what ultimately opened the pathway for President Trump making that surprise announcement of a ceasefire between Israel and the Iranian government.
When it comes to the U.S. strikes on Iran, the governments of Turkey and Saudi Arabia, they both came short of condemning the U.S. action. Qatar and the UAE did not even mention the U.S. Do you expect Middle Eastern nations to just simply stay on the sidelines in this conflict?
I don't. And those statements were very telling. You're right to point them out. Listen, these countries, these Arab Muslim countries, have very firmly condemned the Israeli attack on Iran since it started 12 days ago, did not do so when it came to the United States. One, very careful to cross a volatile President Trump, want to make sure that they maintain the best of relationship. President Trump was in the region only a couple of weeks ago. Two, have an interest very much in playing the role of facilitator, mediator. These are status quo powers. A lot of them have their national agendas, their visions of where they want to take the countries, investing in their economies and developing them. They don't want to see this conflict drag on. They also want to very much kind of defend and hedge against possible blowback, Iran attacking American bases, energy facilities in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. So they want to play in both sides and hedge and play the role of facilitator. And that's why we saw these statements that were not outright condemning the American attack on the Iranian nuclear facility.
In reporting from NBC News, Israel's highly destructive dismantling of Iranian influence in Lebanon was quietly welcomed by those outside the group's base of Shiite supporters, even as Lebanese leaders continued to publicly oppose Israel and champion the Palestinian cause. I'm curious, how has Iran's influence in the region changed?
Iran has been dealt a devastating blow since October 7th, these attacks by Hamas against Israel. We saw Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu systematically go after Iran's forward defense strategy, its employment of these proxy groups throughout the region to come at Israel indirectly through Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Iraq. And so we saw Israel systematically go after them, weaken that defense, this forward defense strategy that the Iranians have, and then go after Iran proper. And so this has been nothing short of a strategic success for the Israeli prime minister. The question really is today, does Bibi Netanyahu quit while he's ahead? Or is there a risk of wanting to push further? I think that is the risk that will have him perhaps butt heads with President Trump moving forward. Trump very much wanting to see that ceasefire in place, wanting to push back on the Israelis and also on the Iranians.
Very quickly for us, if you will, the Trump administration has called this the 12-day war. What do you think? Is it over?
Well, I mean, I think this is classic Trump, right? He wants to put a brand on this. It's an emphasis on the fact that it was only 12 days. We all know that there is an isolationist trend within the MAGA movement that really didn't want to see U.S. involvement in another Middle Eastern war. For Trump, it was one and done. He took that strike against the nuclear program. He wants to bring this to an end and declare victory. I think it's going to be a lot more checkered than that. There's still that pending question of some 409 kilograms of highly enriched uranium that the Iranians moved out of Fordow. Where those are, will the Iranians attempt to enrich them further to nuclear grade, 90% plus? Very thorny diplomatic issues ahead that will need to be negotiated. So maybe coercive diplomacy, perhaps a lasting ceasefire, but I'm just not that sure about that.